For your patience. Oh,
Hello.
this virtual landscape. It's a surprise every day. Okay. I just want to thank you guys for being here. I'm going to start off with that. Thank you again for your patience. I'm going to remind you that your cameras and your microphones are off by design for the entire event. So keep them off if you don't mind. And then I'll just introduce myself. I'm Carrie. I'm on the Anderson's events team. If you've ever been to an Anderson's event, you've probably seen me before. I'm welcoming you to our event, of course, to celebrate the paperback release of Stephanie Wrobel's smash hit novel. The Anderson family has been selling books independently since 1875, believe it or not. And we made it through a lot of really tough seasons, including the last pandemic, but nothing has been quite like what we faced over the last year. So your support of this event, the fact that you guys keep showing up even in this virtual landscape, and your purchase of the book through us does really mean a lot to us, and it's personal for us, and we are just very grateful for your continued business right now. A couple things about how we're going to run today's event. As I mentioned previously, your cameras and microphones are off. If you'd like to ask questions, and I am going to say this very bluntly, please ask questions. People seem to be very shy in this virtual format, but the more questions that you guys ask, and you can put them through the chat here in Zoom, the more questions that you guys ask, really the more interactive and fun the event is. So we'd really love if you go ahead and you just keep putting those through the chat, and I will be monitoring that, and I will be feeding questions to the authors today. So that'll be a lot of fun. One more thing, if you ordered a book for this event, gives 24 hours. So, well, actually it's a Saturday, so maybe, yeah, well, it's still 24 hours, Monday morning to pick it up at the store in Naperville. If you ordered shipping, we'll get those shipped out on Monday as well, because our shipping department is closed on weekends. If you haven't ordered a book for tonight, I'll be going ahead and putting some links in the comments of the chat every now and again with a link to the book in case you're interested. Okay, so now on to the good stuff. Stephanie Wrobel is with us today, of course. She grew up in Chicago, but has been living in the UK for the last 3 years. We love that you're from Chicago, and you'd probably not miss that it's 8 degrees today, by the way, Stephanie.
That's true.
She has an MFA from Emerson College and has had short fiction published in Bellevue Literary Review. Before turning to fiction, she worked as a creative copywriter at various advertising agencies, which is really fun. She is in conversation today with Tarryn Fisher, who is the New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of 10 different novels, a born sun hater. She currently makes her home in Seattle, Washington, where she's joining us from today with her children, husband, and a psychotic husky that I actually kind of want to hear more about. Tarryn writes about villains, so that's exciting.
Hello.
Okay. Welcome, ladies. First of all, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. Okay, how to get started? Well, let's start by first just talking about the book. We're celebrating the paperback release. Why don't you go ahead and just tell us what it's about?
Sure. So the book is called Darling Rose Gold. I'm a good little author. I have my copy here. Yay. And it's about a mother and daughter named Patty and Rose Gold Watts. And the story begins with Patty getting out of prison after serving 5 years for poisoning her daughter. When she gets out, she has nowhere to go, and so she begs her now adult daughter to take her in. And to the shock of everyone in town, Rose Gold says yes. The question is why, and the story unfolds from there.
You're so good at that, Stephanie.
I know, it's almost like you've done that a few times.
I've said it about 200 times, so I've got it down pat at this point. I don't know about you, Tarryn, but I find with like the new book, I'm starting to talk about, with the second book that I'm still finishing, to talk about it when you don't have that down yet is so painful. When people are like, oh, what's it about? And I'm like, nah, it's just like you're spewing things for like a minute straight that are incoherent.
I don't ever get it down. I feel like now, after hearing yours, I need a coach.
I mean, just
I still go, yeah.
Having those like 5 or 6 lines that you're just like, okay, I can go to this, it makes it so much less painful.
Well, I adored your book. It was like crack, like you cannot stop.
It's hard to put down, yeah.
A really marvelous way of getting in a character's head, but then also you created a likable villain, and there's a fine line there between hating that kind of villainous protagonist and just being with them for all their wrong decisions, supporting them all. So I really, really loved her. I loved being in her head. I see her as do you see her as a villain?
Are you talking about Patty or Rose Gold?
Rose Gold.
I see her as, well, first of all, it's interesting. I think you're the first person who's called either of them likable. So thank you for that.
Oh.
Although I guess as somebody who writes villains, perhaps maybe on that scale, they're slightly more bearable. But I view her as, no, I don't think I view her as a villain. I think I view her as a survivor or a victim of her circumstances. You know, I think if any of us were, as I'm trying not to give anything like the ending away, as much as any of us like to think we would do the right thing in any situation, I think if you had the same background that Rose Gold did as a child, and then her experience with trying to get out in the world and, you know, socialize and make friends and be close with family members, I think a lot of us maybe wouldn't necessarily make the exact same choices as her, but I think it's a lot harder to like always be the good guy when everything is going against you.
I think I see that. We probably would have to say what we define a villain as, but villains are just people who have, to me, overcome some type of trauma, and then they get really interesting and they make interesting decisions. It's not like the basic
like henchmen.
Tarryn, I'm really interested to hear that you saw Rose Gold as the villain, because I actually saw Patty as the villain, even though I know that she's mentally, like, you know, disturbed. I wonder if it'll change my opinion of her if I ask you, Stephanie, like, did Patty, like, had she really just convinced herself that everything was the way she saw it, or did she like know how horrible she was and that she was, you know, really abusing this child? Like,
yeah. So this is what actually led me to want to write the novel. When I first found out about Munchausen by proxy, I was like, you know, reading like real life case studies of all these horrible things that usually mothers are doing to usually their children, as in most cases. And I was like, how can you, I just like couldn't square the two. You know, we think of the mother-child bond as a sacred thing, or at least something relatively positive, but in these cases it's so horrible. And I was like, do they actually believe it? Because it is a mental health disorder. And so I don't think I can definitively say, but the conclusion that I came to, I was reading, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Mindhunter, the book by the former FBI profiler. And I'm paraphrasing poorly here, but he said something about, you know, he was talking about, I think, psychopaths at the time, but he said something to the effect of, if they knew that the conditions were not in their favor, they would decline to commit the crime. So basically, like, the fact that these mothers are doing these things in secret and not just, you know, poisoning the soup or injecting bacteria into their children's veins, like out in the open, and they're able to hide this abuse, to me says like they know that they're doing something wrong. So that was where, I mean, again, not going too much into the ending of the book, that was kind of where I came down on it with Patty. I think from my research, I have found that a lot of these people who have Munchausen by proxy are such accomplished liars that they can convince themselves that they're actually telling the truth and really believe what they're
like the narcissism.
Yeah, and a lot of times there's borderline personality disorders as well that go hand in hand with Munchausen. So, and definitely narcissism for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's funny in one way, because like you said, Rose Gold, obviously she doesn't make great like decisions, right? And is villainous in some ways, but I think I was sympathetic towards her because of everything that had happened to her. But you had a really good point, Tarryn. I think you had made the point that like sometimes villains, like they're people who've been through a trauma. So it's like interesting that like I forgave Rose Gold, but like probably Patty, you know, had also been created into this villainous character. But for some reason, I just had a really hard time forgiving her for it or looking past it. So we're getting another Rose Gold book though. Is that right? This is what you're writing?
No, this is a totally different book.
Also, we're not getting any more?
No, that's the end of Patty and Rose Gold's story.
I hate you.
I feel like we know what we need to know about these two.
It's true.
You know, I like to leave the ending a little bit open to like, you can imagine what happens after they walk off the page without it not feeling resolved. And I hope that I've done that in this case. But I think going back to your point, Carrie, about Patty, it's almost always the case that people with Munchausen by proxy also have been severely abused or neglected as children. And so I touch on that in a few ways. I mean, there's not a ton of flashbacks to it. I think the more going back to it there was, probably the more sympathetic, you would have been toward her. But it is a case, that's what I think is so interesting, this like perpetrator victim thing is almost all of these cases like start out as victims and having these horrible things done. And then it's like, what flips the switch between, it's horrible to say, but plenty of people are abused as children and then go on to be loving, functional
exactly
parents,
Yeah.
So it's interesting, like what is it that flips the, some people just like go off the deep end and some people can go on and conduct their lives healthfully.
It's true. Let's switch to talking a little bit about the writing process for something like this. And Tarryn, I'm going to lean on you here too, because you are obviously a expert at writing villains. How do you craft a villain and like walk that line without going like too far over, like to keep it interesting so you don't lose your reader who's like, I give up on this person completely, right? Like, how do you find that balance?
I think I go too far over, and I think I collect readers who just like that type of too far over. But I'm so deeply interested in humans who do and make interesting decisions, not the typical, they get a little grit from their upbringing. I mean, I was raised by a crazy man, and I'm not a wicked person, but I have very villainous traits. So then, I try to tone it down in my books, and I don't feel like I do well at that. But I think that you do, because I mean, you didn't even see her as a villain, and I'm like, this is the most beautiful villain, Rose Gold.
She looks very cool.
I think I love, Tarryn, your confidence. This is like my goal writer. I mean, you're obviously a veteran and much more established, but I do think as I was writing the book, I did have some concern initially of like, I just knew like most people were going to hate these characters and maybe feel empathy for them for a sentence here and there, but for the most part, not really. And I was like, it's going to turn a lot of people off. But then I was like, you know what? As a reader myself, I really enjoy reading unlikable or villainous characters, as long as they're interesting. If they can make me laugh, or if they can just shock me, as long as I'm not ambivalent about a character, I'm very happy to follow them along for 300-400 pages. And so I figured, you know what? I'm not the only reader out there who's like that. So I do think I agree with Tarryn that it's a matter of just like finding your readers who are happy to go along for that ride.
Yeah. And I forgot what I was going to say, but there was a moment with Rose Gold that I adopted, because I didn't know she was going to be villainous, to me at least. But when she bought that house, that's when I was like, oh, look at you. You're up to something.
Well, I feel like, especially with female characters, like so often we just expect them to do the right thing, and it's like, be the bigger person, buck up, and it's just like, I don't know. It's like you hear that story so many times. But what I really wanted for Rose Gold was for her to just claim her independence, and you could definitely say that she did not go about it in the healthiest way. But one thing you can say at the end is like, she finally stands up for herself after being a doormat to, different degrees throughout a lot of her life. She finally stands up for herself, which is what I really wanted for her. So
I feel like a lot of readers and women who've loved this book, this was a big seller in our store, could really identify, I think, with that, like that piece at the ending. And that's maybe why, like, I was sympathetic to her as well. Like, even though what she was doing was awful, like, it's just like this, like, finally, like, she's like, taking back what was taken from her in a way. And, but like I said, it's just really interesting, I think, how authors and writers are just able to craft like that balance where like you find yourself sometimes like rooting for like a terrible person, right? Or like,
we need these books. We need books like Darling Rose Gold, because there are a lot of women who've been trampled, and you see this character like kind of walk over the fire, and she comes out fine. And we were reading so many books for years about perfect woman, especially during, I think, the whole chick lit era. It was a cute, perfect woman I was reading about. I started saying, but where are the villains like me? I want to read about me and root for me for once. So I'm so grateful that this literature has opened up to naughty woman.
Yeah, and
It's
I think
been a big swing, and I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, and Tarryn, you worded it as, I think you said, like wanting to write about interesting people. And for me, I look at it the same, but I always say I like to write about the outliers on society. You know, a lot of domestic thrillers especially are like, it could happen to anyone, you know, it's just like you're in a marriage and like something just goes awry. And I love reading those stories, but what I like to write is like, this could not just happen to anyone. Like there is something going on inside this person's brain chemistry that makes this a very specific case to them. And I think those kinds of people are so fascinating. I think
Stephanie, we're going to be
especially-
best friends. We're going to be best friends.
Great. We'll be continuing a weekly Zoom, and then people can just come listen to us talk about villains for an hour.
We're all about connections and connecting people here at Anderson. We actually do have a couple who met in line at one of our events and got married, by the way. It's something I'm very proud of like, yeah. Anything can happen at a book signing. All right, we're starting to get a couple questions in from the audience. Some of them are great. Well, all of them are great. Sorry, I should say. Serena asked, in your research, Stephanie, did you interview anyone who had actually survived Munchausen by proxy?
No, I didn't speak to anyone directly. I did a lot of, I read a memoir of a survivor. I did a lot of case reading and just like articles that had been written. I also read a textbook that was written by a doctor who specializes in this area. But it's interesting. I mean, it is a relatively rare disease, but anecdotally, the number of people who have said, I know someone who knows someone who did this, this, and this was shocking and more than a little disturbing. I kind of thought it was like this ripped from the headlines, like only, you know.
No, I know
once in a
someone.
boom. Oh, do you? Yeah. I mean,
no, it's like you said, it's creepy.
Anybody who knows a nurse, I mean, I said the thing earlier about injecting bacteria. I know somebody whose sister-in-law is a nurse, and the mother had been injecting pond water into her toddler. Sorry, everyone. That's like really bringing down but yeah, it's crazy. Like some of the stuff that has happened in real life is worse than like anything that's even referenced, you know, in the books or like the famous cases we've heard of.
So speaking of the famous cases, we got a question from Lauren that I think we all probably have the same question. I know Tarryn and I were actually talking about it before you log in. She says, you mentioned in the past that you got inspiration from the story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. Was she also your inspiration for the name Rose? And then I'm going to ask you also to just talk a little bit about the Gypsy Rose similarities and.
Sure. So no, she was not the inspiration for the name, although it's interesting. Like, I wonder, I mean, that is one case, of course, that I researched among a ton. So I wonder if like that name was like in the back of my subconscious somehow, but no, she wasn't a direct inspiration. That case is obviously the most famous that everybody's familiar with. The book is not meant to be based on that case in any way. But you start to notice when you read, you know, that one and a bunch of others that there tend to be common traits between both the perpetrators and the victims. So a lot of the stuff that those two, that Dee Dee and Gypsy did, like I was noticing that in the other real life cases that I was reading as well. So it's just very interesting because it does seem so unusual, but then when you really start to dig in, like you see, oh yeah, like here are the signs. But of course, you know, if you're a teacher, if you're a doctor, you assume that the mother or the parent has the child's best interest at heart. And so a lot of times it takes a while to become suspicious, even though to us in retrospect, it's easy to say when you're reading the article, like, how did you not know? But, you know, I mean, it's usually, you know, a lot of these perpetrators have medical experience themselves. A lot of them are nurses. And so they know what to do to fake these illnesses. So it's a lot harder to catch them.
That's insanity. So speaking about that from like the psychological perspective, and this question's really for both of you, are you both just interested in psychology? There's such a psychological angle to both of your writing styles, and you both obviously need to have kind of this understanding of various psychological stuff to even write the things that you write. So is that just like a hobby interest that you guys have, or is it just like something that sort of found its way into your writing? Or
Go ahead, Tarryn.
Well, I got my degree in psychology, so
okay.
I feel like I'm not so much a good writer as I am good at people. I think that's my true gift is people. So yeah, I love human psychology, and human depravity is my favorite topic.
Yeah, I'm really interested in psychology as well. My gift is not people. I mean, I can socialize and talk with people, but there was a point when, when I was younger and deciding like, oh, maybe I want to be a psychologist, but I think I would be a horrible psychologist, but I'm a good observer of people. And I love the research phase and looking into just different, it doesn't have to be, a mental health disorder. It can just be just like these quirky things like we've been talking about, just people who are unusual and just like don't abide by the social norms that most people do.
Are you both true crime fans?
Yes.
I'm not.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I thought for
I've
sure.
I've never tried.
I mean, I will say, I think at this point, it takes like this sounds like very depraved, but it takes like a special case to really, if it's just like, the husband clearly murdered the wife, I'm just like, yeah, okay. I mean, I don't enjoy hearing about like people being killed. It's more just like the puzzle or the mystery when something unusual really grips you, I guess.
And I think I'm interested in kidnappings. Those are the stories that I do follow, like the Jean Benet case and the Madeline in France. I guess that would be the true crime. But yeah, I never watched the documentaries. They depress me. It's real.
Yeah, that's true.
I watch all the Netflix documentaries, and kind of what you were just saying, Stephanie, like at this point, I mean, we've all been stuck inside for so long, and we've watched, whatever is in our wheelhouse on Netflix. And like the other day, I even said to my husband, like, oh, I'm not interested in this one. It's just one murder. And then he was like, what is wrong with you?
I know. Yeah. It sounds horrible, but it's true. I've thought that
but
too.
I'm like, at this point, I mean, it just like builds the more and more you watch. But, all right, I'm going to switch gears a little bit and ask you guys, this actually came in from Judy, and she said, who are some of your favorite authors?
I'm interested to hear Stephanie's answer because I have to go read these books now.
And I know this is a hard answer because like, you don't want it to get back to other author friends and stuff. So I always say like, we'll preface it by saying that you love lots of authors, but we're asking you for like one or two good ones.
Can you tell me like authors kind of that are similar to you, Stephanie? Like who do you love to read that has your style? I would like to read those.
Okay. That's hard. I think that's hard for me to say because I think it's hard to like judge my own work. I was going to say Shirley Jackson, but I'm not comparing myself to her by any stretch. But I love like her creepy. I just think her stories are like so creepy. But We Have Always Lived in the Castle is like probably, if not my favorite book, my top 3. I think,
I'm going to read that.
Yeah, Mary Cat is like the creepiest narrator, and she's just so great. Anyway. I also love Dan Shawn. Again, okay, you asked to compare him to myself, but he's like literary horror thriller. I think he's really talented. He's really good at very unreliable narrators, ambiguous endings, which I like. I don't know who I would compare to myself. That's a hard question. Do you know who you would compare, like other authors you compare yourself to?
Oh, I would just say like mind-bendy thrillers. I like the way you told that story, though. I'm very eagerly waiting your next book. But I do a lot. Caroline Kepnes, have you read?
Oh yeah. No, I haven't. But like everybody raves about you.
Oh my gosh, by the end of that book, you're with him no matter what he's done. Which
that's a perfect example of a villain that you are rooting for, and you're like, why am I rooting for this person? Like I know. Yeah.
No, you want him to kill people, innocent people. You become the murderer with that book.
Yeah.
I mean, this is an obvious, speaking of like villains that you're rooting for, this is an obvious one, but Amy from Gone Girl, I tell you.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I was just like, you know what? This woman has a plan and she is organized and I am behind her. Like, I don't care what she's doing.
Yeah, that was brilliant. And B.A. Paris, she's over there with you in the UK. I love B.A. Paris.
Yeah.
By the way, you're living my dream life. I want to live in London and I'm jealous. So.
Not right now. We're on our 3rd national lockdown, so
Oh.
we can't like leave this area. But yeah, London is a great city.
So I love my British authors. I think I read a lot of British authors.
Yeah, it's a good bunch.
All right, we've gotten a couple questions asking, what are you both working on next? Like what's coming out next for both of you? And also what are you working on long-term?
You first, Stephanie. I want to know.
I am working on my 2nd book, so I'm about to finish the 5th and hopefully final draft of it. So this has been a lot harder than the first one, which I've heard is pretty common. But this one is about 2 sisters, and one of them gets pulled into this self-improvement program on a private island in Maine. And it's got all these quirky rules. You sign up for 6 months. You can't talk to anybody outside of the island. Your phone's taken away, no internet, no sex, no touching. So it's all these crazy rules. And not surprisingly, the sister on the outside of this thinks that this is a cult. And so she gets an email one day from somebody on the island that says, you know, hey, if you don't tell your sister this secret that you've been keeping from her, we're going to. And so both sisters have secrets that they're keeping from each other. And the book begins with the one sister, Natalie, going to the island to basically tell her sister what she's done and then hopefully bring her home. So it's a book about sisters and cults and magic. And yeah,
I'll be waiting for my arc.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
And I'm not following that. I can't do it like she does. I'm not talking about my book.
That was my first time. That was not great. Tarryn,
That was really good because I'm like waiting for this book
come
now.
out, didn't you? That's yours.
No,
How
I
about you,
really am
Taryn?
not
What have
going
you got
to.
coming out?
No, I can't. She does it so well.
She does, but you'll put your own spin on it. It's all good.
So it's about a group of 5 women who go to Vegas together and they get into trouble and they bring it back home. And that's all I can say. I feel so insecure now.
No, I think that
No.
sounds fantastic because none of
Yeah.
us can like travel or go to Vegas right now. So I can't wait to
Yeah.
read about people going and going fun places and doing things.
Is it 5 points of view, Tarryn, or do you just choose a few of them?
I just have 2.
Okay,
The 2
I was going to
points.
say five sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, I don't know that I could do that. Stephen King does that really well,
Yeah.
but I could.
Well, if we could all be Stephen King.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, that's my goal. I'm working
Yeah.
hard.
yeah. Someday.
So, this is a great question, actually. We've been getting this at a lot of our events. Thanks, Lauren, for putting this one in here. Do you think it was easier or more difficult to be writing books during lockdown and the pandemic? And then I'll add on to that, how has the pandemic changed like your schedule or your routine for writing? Taryn, you go first.
Yeah,
Oh,
Tarryn, you go ahead.
I've gotten a lot better actually because I love distractions when I'm writing. If I can't think of what to write in the chapter, like I will leave and go do something fun. And now there's nothing fun to do. So I've developed actually good habits, discipline. So that's the positive that came out of COVID for me. I'm writing more, a lot more.
That's good. Stephanie?
Yeah, I would say it hasn't changed my routine at all because I always wrote at home, usually first thing when I get up. But I don't know. I don't know if it's made it better or worse. It's better in the sense of, like Tarryn said, there's like no distraction, so there's no reason not to. But I've also there's been a lot more lows, I think, just psychologically, because it starts to feel like you're living the same day over and over. And I think as much as I love writing, like the fact that basically what I'm doing every single day is just sitting at a computer for like 8 hours and then sitting and watching TV or sitting and reading a book, it starts to feel like, oh my God. I don't think this is, exclusive to writers. I think everybody's probably feeling this to some degree of just this caginess of like, oh my God, like the year is wasted. But I'm trying to look at it as it's not wasted. You're getting the book done. It's going to be able to, come out next year. So mixed results, I would say.
Do either of you have like children or family members who are home all day while you're trying to write?
Yes, I have everybody. And my husband is working from home now, and he has a whole new appreciation for, for women who work and take care of the children.
It's a good thing to come out of all this. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just have my husband, and he, luckily, we actually moved midway, or hopefully midway through the pandemic over the summer, to a bit bigger of a place. Cause before for his job, he's on the phone on Zoom for like 5 or 6 hours every single day. And I'm like, sitting in the other room, just like, I need silence. So now we're a bit more spread out, which is nice.
I know. Yes, everybody got new headsets for Christmas at our house for that reason. It's like, put on the headset. Like, okay. Serena asked, this is for Stephanie. What do you miss most about Chicago? She moved away 3 years ago, Serena did, and she misses Lou Malnati's Pizza and Michigan Avenue. How about you, Stephanie?
I miss the restaurant scene for sure. Mexican food specifically. The Mexican food in London is pretty shitty. And I also miss the comedy scene is really great in Chicago, and jazz. I feel like I moved away just at a time when I started to get out of like the going out super late and just like getting extremely drunk with friends phase into more of like an appreciation of like, okay, let's like go have cocktails and like listen to live music. I moved out of Chicago like just around that phase. So now, having lived elsewhere, I've also lived in Boston. And so I know those are the things for me personally, like the food, the comedy, and the jazz in Chicago is just like, I don't think it hasn't been better in the places that I've lived personally.
There's no place quite like Chicago. It's
London is superior in I'm so jealous. We can trade.
We
should do house swap.
Yeah. You know what? I've never been to Seattle, but I'm actually planning, if things work out, I'm hoping to visit this summer because it just looks beautiful. I haven't really done much of the Pacific Northwest, so.
Oh.
Yeah, and that's when we will solidify our new best friendship.
Great.
When you come visit. I'll take you around.
Perfect.
There's also nowhere quite like the Pacific Northwest, actually. So, all right. So let me ask you guys, switching gears again a little bit. I know as authors, especially successful authors, you are sent a lot of ARCs, which are advanced reading copies for those watching from home, of new and upcoming things. And I was wondering if there's anything that you guys have read lately or blurbed that you are excited and that you can give us the heads up about. Anything I should add to our pre-orders list?
I was given an arc of Darling Rose Gold. So that was by my editor. She was like, you have to read this. And I think if I have arcs lately, what is coming out?
Or what are you reading right now?
I just read A Special Place for Women by Laura Hankin. It's not in the thriller genre. I don't only read thrillers, but she's such a funny writer. And it's a story about, it's based on The Wing, that group that is supposed to be like for successful women to come together, and it's like a co-working space, but then it's also like a kind of this like exclusive group. I think it's like a New York based thing. But anyway, it's kind of based on that, where it's got these like handful of women and this like down on her luck girl goes and tries to like infiltrate. She's a reporter, and she tries to infiltrate this group, and they've got like all of these strange secrets. They're really influential. They're like helping people get elected to government, but there's like something off about the group. And it's just this like really intriguing read, but it's also hilarious. Again, she's just such a funny writer. So if that one's not on your list, I would put that one on.
All right. Tarryn,
I just read this one. Yeah, it's called White Ivy. Very
I've
villainous.
seen that in our break room, like where we keep all our, okay.
That was excellent. But I'm not going to tell you what it's about because he does such a good job. In fact, I think I need you to read my books before they're published so you can tell me what they're about.
I mean, after you've just described your love of villains, I'm obviously putting all of the things you've written to the top of my list because this is kismet.
Yes.
Okay. Have you guys read anything lately that is maybe not upcoming or coming out, but just already out that you really love or that you recommend to our guests today?
Well, I know if you're interested in Munchausen by proxy, there's a book by Andrea Dunlop called We Came Here to Forget. And that's also a really interesting book about the illness.
Is that fiction or nonfiction, Tara?
That is fiction, but based very much on her own experience.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, if anybody is looking for more Munchausen by proxy vibes, there's a memoir called Sickened by Julie Gregory that came out quite a long time ago. And then there's also a novel called, I believe it's called Emily is Gone Grace is Gone by Emily Elgar, I believe is her name. I was supposed to have an event with her, right at the beginning of the pandemic. She's a British writer. And we were going to talk about Munchausen by proxy, but I read her novel as well, and that's a good one.
I want to read Sickened. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, it was. I sometimes tell it. Well, I won't give anything away. Never mind. I was gonna tell a horrifying anecdote from that book, but you just read it.
Okay.
Have either of you, by the way, ever had anything you've written turned into a movie or television show? And then Lauren asked, could you see Darling Rose Gold becoming a movie?
Ooh.
I have not had anything turned into. I only have Darling Rose Gold, so my answer is no. Tarryn, I don't know about you.
There's always options, but I mean, it's a very hard process to get from a book being optioned to a movie and then or a show and actually being made. So there has been interest, but nothing has happened yet. But it's our time, Stephanie. These interesting women will make it to the screen.
It is our time. I feel like there's a real market for this right now. Like this kind of movie and, kind of for the reason you said, Tarryn, like we're all just tired of seeing perfect women on screen and as much as we were tired of reading about them, right? So
yeah, I do think that's true. I think Munchausen by proxy specifically has kind of had its moment in the light between, I think there was an HBO documentary, there was that show on Hulu. So I think my sense, having gone through the process of, looking to option it and stuff, is that Hollywood is kind of we've gotten that story out. But I do think, I agree that complicated women and nasty women, naughty women, whatever we want to call them, seem to be having more of their time in the spotlight, which is great for us.
I can definitely see Rose Gold as a show because you created a really good setting in that house. I spent a lot of time in that house. I think even after the book was finished, that's just all the feelings there. So I picture this complete kind of indie with her at the store as she's checking people out and her beat. You know what I'm saying? Like an indie feel to the whole thing. Yeah. I would love it.
I would love it too, to be clear.
And Jennifer Aniston in, what was that movie? The New Girl? She's kind of a cashier.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, that's how I picture Rose Gold being.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I remember that. So let me ask you both. So let's look at, for Tarryn, for your last book that came out, and Stephanie for Darling Rose Gold, how long from first draft to seeing it on a shelf was how long did that take?
I wrote the first draft. No, I can't remember. 2017, fall of 2017, I think, and it came out March 2020. So from what I've heard from other authors, I feel like that's relatively quick. I wrote maybe it was summer, doesn't matter. I wrote the first draft of it very quickly and then threw the entire thing away. I was in grad school at the time for creative writing, and I had a professor who very kindly offered to read the first 100 pages. And he was like, this kind of just reads like a case study of Munchausen by proxy. And I was like, oh shit, he's right. And so I ended up throwing everything away except for the two main characters, and rewriting it throughout 2018. And at the end of 2018, I used it as my thesis. So at the time, I just thought you know what, worst case, I'll get a graduate degree out of this. I thought maybe an agent, but I truly did not think that it was going to be published. And so a lot of people are like, why'd you choose Munchausen to launch your career? And I was like, that's it's adorable that you think that I had some sort of strategy involved.
But you took creative writing, you were studying it. And how do you think that affected you as a writer?
Well,
Like-
I had never, you know, like undergrad, I hadn't taken any creative writing classes. And so I'm the kind of person who, if I take have a program to do something, a structured environment to learn, I can accelerate much more quickly. I do really well in those kinds of things. So it was actually during the first time I moved to London, I was having a hard time finding advertising jobs. And I was between freelance jobs for a really long time. And I had always wanted to be an author, but I was like, no, nobody like makes a living doing that. So it was during this down period that I was like, you know what, I'm just going to try to apply to grad schools because it just feels less overwhelming if I have some help and like take some classes. But I knew going into grad school that I wanted to come out of it with a finished novel. That was like goal number one, the only goal that really mattered. And so I think it just gave me permission to take those 2 years and solely focus on this and to be around other people who were also pursuing it. And it wasn't something silly, you know, prior to grad school and even after, I mean, honestly, until I got the book deals, I would say like, it was kind of almost something I was embarrassed to admit that I wanted to do because it's like, everybody wants to be a writer, you know, and it's very few people make it is just the reality of it. So I think it did give me it was like this playground. And I mean, I loved the program. Like every day I was like, oh my God, I'm reading and writing and this is so great. So it was wonderful.
I had thought about applying and then I felt that all the criticism would crush me. And
yeah,
that's why
you know
I
what?
never.
Yeah, I found in general, most of the peer critiques were extremely thoughtful. There were only a couple people. There was one guy in particular who shall remain unnamed, but he's like this 23-year-old guy who wrote like cliche and trite on like every page of my short stories. And that was definitely hard, especially for somebody who had never really done creative writing before. But most people were very supportive. And I had one professor in particular who really took me under her wing and ended up helping me, you know, revise this entire book / thesis. So without her, I don't think I would have been able to have it finished as quickly as I did.
I love that story.
Thanks.
Especially since I avoided it because I thought it was going to hurt me and it helps you. And
yeah, I mean, I think people are, you know, writers are generally insecure. And I think we all, you know, it's like the golden rule, right? It's just like, treat other people like you want to be treated. And you know, you're going to be the one that has your story up for review. So if nothing else, like, you know, don't be a jerk when it's, you know, when it's your turn to critique. Most people were very kind and thoughtful.
I think also there's the worry that you go into that sort of education and then you're told that you don't actually have talent. Like I enter this program and then you shouldn't be here. Like you're not a writer.
Subjective.
Yeah.
It's such a vulnerable occupation, really, being an author, I feel like.
Yeah.
So kind of speaking about that, about like feedback and vulnerability, this is a question I love to ask, especially thriller writers. Do you hear a lot from your readers and what do they say? Are they mostly positive or are some of them, because I feel like there's room in your material to have some real feedback or interesting experiences with people who might relate to certain parts of your characters. Do you hear from a lot of that or?
Well, I started out as romance and then it was kind of edgier romance and then I bled into thriller. So I hear a lot of opinions. Some people want me to keep writing romance. Some people are like, don't do that again. So I don't listen. I don't read anything anymore. I am a writer and I'm here now and you can not like it or like it. I'm just going to keep writing. So I try not to listen anymore.
Yeah, nobody has like emailed me directly to be like, I hated your book. I have like seen that in other authors and I'm waiting for that, like waiting for that shoe to drop. But I mean, I've gotten tagged occasionally on social media and like
I see that people tagging people in negative reviews. I'm like, why would you do that? I know.
Yeah. I mean, you can like go ahead and like leave the bad review, but like, please don't, there's no need to tag the author in it at all. But like Tarryn, I don't look at Goodreads. I don't look at Amazon. I don't Google myself because knowing me, like the 5-star reviews immediately leave my head, but I will remember verbatim
Yes.
like the 1-star review, and it will
Yes.
stick with me. And like for someone with the memory of a goldfish, my capacity to remember poor reviews of myself is like boundless.
That's so
Don't even
human.
go there.
Yeah.
I feel like that is just like such a massive part of the human experience, like not being able to let go of that negativity.
Yeah.
Oh, so Tarryn, you mentioned that you've actually written in 2 different genres. I was going to ask, would either of you, I don't know if you'd go back to a different genre, but would either of you consider a genre besides thriller writing?
I think that I never really set out to like be in the thriller writing community necessarily. And I think the thing that gives me pause is I don't want to ever have to put something in my story to make it more thrillery. You know what I mean? Like I'm not really interested in like there's a dead body in chapter 1 and you know like who done it sort of thing. I mean I am interested in dark characters, so I think that lends itself to thrillers, but if anything, I think I would be more likely to switch to like general fiction, or I'd be interested in writing kind of suspenseful things, maybe historically. So historical fiction, but not like what we classically think of it. But I don't know. I mean, I'm still establishing myself, so I'll be writing suspense for a while, I think.
I think that when the reader gets to know your style, like how your brain works, they come back for that when you find your people too. I mean, I don't think I care what you write. I like the way you write. So I'm going to come back for your brain every time.
Agreed.
And that's a new trend. I feel like that's a new trend now. You find an author and you kind of can process very well with them. And then you stick with, you know, that author. They think like you.
Did you find it hard, Tarryn, to switch from romance to thriller as far as like for publishing support and stuff? Was there a lot of pushback?
I don't overthink anything. I'm very impulsive. So I never meant to write a romance. I do not love. Okay. I'm not into that stuff. So I had a very personal experience that led me to write my first romance. And hardly anyone considered it romance because it's devastating. It ends devastating, and romance is supposed to end happily. So then I just kept writing devastating love stories. That was my thing. And so I don't think it was a shock to people when I started writing thrillers, because it's always been dark love, you know, dark minds in general. So I do think people read now because of the types of stories I tell rather than the genre of stories.
Yeah, that's nice.
Do you guys ever, I don't know if resent is the right word, but dislike, I guess, the whole idea that you write one type of book and then you kind of get pigeonholed into like, oh, she is a thriller writer, she is a suspense writer. Like, is that something that causes stress or is problematic for you? Or
I mean, I think only in the sense of like, if I just want to write a story that I think is interesting. So as long as it's like, you can't write that story because it's not like for you, then that would annoy me. But otherwise, like, I get it. I mean, I used to work in advertising, so I understand, you know, how marketing works, that you need to build a brand, that you need to give customers some expectation of what's coming. But it's so early in my career that I can't really say. It hasn't been like an issue to this point.
I think personally, I think we're seeing a lot more of writers writing in multiple genres, and it shouldn't be an issue. I don't think it's really an issue for anyone except for the marketing people and the advertising people, really. I mean, I don't think that.
And it can also become your brand to jump around like that. That's become part of mine, I know. And
which is really interesting, I think, as a reader. I kind of like going into something not knowing what to expect, but that could just be
I agree. I think those books that are like, I don't know how to classify this, those are sometimes the most intriguing books that don't fit really neatly into any container.
Well, I don't read the back of books. Even when I started reading Darling Rose Gold, I remember just opening it and being like, oh shit, like this is where we're going.
Yeah, there are some books, like I just read Foe by Ian Reid, and it was like, I did read the back of it, but I was recommending it to some people and I was like, don't read the back of the book, because it's just like, it's one of those books that is just unsettling and you know something's off, but you're like, I don't know what is off. And because you have no expectations, I think it makes the reading experience even better.
Okay, I'm gonna end. I want to make sure I get to this one last question that Lauren put in, and it's kind of a specific one for Stephanie. The weird painting on the wall of Patty's bedroom in Rose Gold's house. She made it seem like it was already there, but did Rose Gold paint it?
Oh yeah, that's a good
Yes.
question.
Yes, Rose Gold painted the eyes on the ceiling to screw with her mother.
Okay.
It just added to, you know,
Yeah,
that
do not
creepy
tell me she
feeling.
is not a villain.
Yeah, I mean,
No, I see it.
Yeah,
She definitely does villainous things. There's no getting around that at
I
all.
love it.
But yeah, I think like Carrie said, most people just like they can feel some sympathy for Rose Gold, but like none for Patty, which is funny to me because Patty went through the same thing. I mean, maybe not the poison, but like she was, you know, beaten and then neglected for her childhood. But it's just interesting. It's, you know, the hard times that Patty fell on are less on the page, which is why I think that there's less sympathy for her.
And you see, this is where I go too far because I would then feel compelled to write Patty's story and make everyone feel sad for her. And then some people you should just leave alone.
Yeah, it's interesting because on one hand, like they're yours, so you do feel a little defensive of them, but on the other hand, it's like, yeah, they're objectively doing terrible things.
Mhm.
So I get it. But you know, it's the same I imagine that Patty herself would be thinking. When I'm writing Patty, I'm not thinking about all the terrible things she's done. I'm minimizing those and just thinking about like how clever she can be and how, you know, like personable some at times. So I think that's what we all do. I mean, that's why I think depraved characters, to borrow Tarryn's term, is so interesting because very few people are all evil. You know, like everybody has their moments of where they do good things or there's like glimmers of hope for them.
That's not what I want to study though. I want to watch you do the wrong thing and I want to know why and I want to know what brought you to this decision.
Yeah.
So I'm here for
Yeah.
the evil people.
Yeah. I
like
mean,
reading
I
it.
think stories of redemption are just like a lot more common, I guess. You know, like there's plenty of those stories out there where, and you know what, you can re-envision Rose Gold's story or like probably any of your stories, Tarryn, with where the character does redeem themselves. But like, I don't know, that's just less interesting, I think.
Yeah.
For me personally.
Now, half of us have not redeemed ourselves for some of the bad things we've done. So
Yeah.
That's also
I just write
very
books
human.
about it. That's my penance.
It's free therapy.
Okay, well, I think we are out of questions from the audience. We're out of my questions. Do either one of you have anything else you'd like to ask each other before we sign off for the day or cover?
I'm just really excited that I got to talk to you. And I do want an arc, please, of the next one. Can you give us a title or it's not titled yet?
I can't share the title yet.
Okay. What about privately in a private message with me? Can I know the title?
Maybe, yes. I just
Okay.
want to thank Tarryn for joining us today. It was pretty last minute and I realize it's a Saturday. So thank you for coming in and doing this. She was super kind. Like we don't even really know each other. She just tweeted about my book and how much she liked it and offered to help. And it was really, really lovely having this chat and getting to know you better. And thank you to everybody who came and listened and sent great questions in.
Yes. Thank you, both of you, for being here, for continuing to show up in this virtual landscape for those of us out there still in, you know, trying to make these author events work. We really appreciate it. Thank you to all of you who came today to the event. Like I said earlier, we just are so grateful for your continued business and your continued support. It's just a terrible time for a small business, but we have just, I mean, on the plus side, we've felt so much love this year from everybody too. So that's an amazing piece. But thank you. And everybody have a great rest of your weekend. And please, most of all, just stay safe. I feel like we're almost through this. Maybe.
Yeah.
Fingers
Oh.
crossed.
Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for
Thanks
coming.
so much, Carrie.
Bye.
Bye.